Bienvenue sur le podcast Révolution bilingue. Que signifie le bilinguisme dans notre cerveau et pourquoi le bilinguisme est-il important? Dans ce nouvel épisode de Révolution bilingue, nous avons la chance de parler avec un des grands maîtres de la discipline, François Grosjean, bien connu pour ses travaux sur le bilinguisme et le biculturalisme. Dans Life as a Bilingual, son dernier livre qui vient de sortir aux presses universitaires de Cambridge, François Grosjean aborde l'étendue du phénomène du bilinguisme, l'utilisation de 2 ou plusieurs langues, le bilinguisme à travers les différentes étapes de la vie. Il y parle aussi du devenir bilingue, du bilinguisme dans la famille et chez les enfants ayant des besoins particuliers et l'acquisition d'une langue seconde. En guise d'introduction à ces thématiques qui nous intéressent particulièrement pour ce podcast, French Morning et Calec vous présentent en mode bilingue cette interview enregistrée en public à New York. Professeur Grosjean, dites-nous quelques mots sur vous, vos origines, votre parcours personnel et professionnel.
Thank you, first of all, for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. I was born in France. My father is French, and therefore, at that time, I got French nationality. But my mother's British. Then all kinds of things happened to me and my life, and I was educated for 10 years in English schools. So when I was 18, I was basically British. But then I came back to France to do my university studies, and then I came to the States for 12 years and enjoyed it a lot. When I left, in fact, they said, "You've made it here, you're a full professor, you've got an NSF grant, why are you going back to Europe?" And I say, look, if a Californian leaves Massachusetts to go back to California, why can't a Frenchman go back, or European go back to Europe? Anyway, and then we've been living in Switzerland for some 30 years. So culturally, I'd say I'm a member of 4 cultures. I'm a mosaic of cultures. I'm very pleased to be a mosaic of cultures. As for nationalities, I have 2 nationalities, French and Swiss.
Avec une vie menée sur plusieurs continents et dans 4 cultures différentes, françaises, anglaises, américaines et suisses, vous êtes fier de cette mosaïque culturelle et linguistique qui vous compose et qui sont au cœur de vos travaux. Mais vous souvenez-vous du moment où vous vous êtes senti bilingue, avec le français et l'anglais que vous maîtrisez complètement?
I remember it very well because I'm not one of these infant bilinguals. Infant bilinguals, by the way, are very rare. They only represent between 15 and 20%. Most of the literature is on these wonderful little children. My grandson is an infant bilingual. But I was an adolescent bilingual, or older child bilingual. My mother, British, decided that I should learn English, and so she took me out of my primary school in France. Basically, she kidnapped me. It's a real story, in fact, she did. And put me into an English school in Switzerland. And over the next months, with the help of some of the kids who knew some French and the teachers knew some French, and my willingness to learn English, I became bilingual in this English boarding school in Switzerland.
Est-ce que toute votre famille est bilingue?
It is, but we started it in the wrong way. We came to America when our oldest son was almost 2 years, and we said, "Oh, we'll speak French at home, and he'll go to an English-speaking daycare, and everything will be fine." Of course, it didn't work. And at the time, I hadn't really given it much thought. But little Mark very quickly became an English-speaking monolingual, Then, thank God, a sabbatical came along, and we had a chance to go back to Europe, and so we chose a French-speaking country, Switzerland, and our children, both boys, 10 and 5, became bilingual, and now, in fact, one is quintilingual, 5, and the other one is trilingual. So, for parents who are despairing, don't despair. Think of us. We brought 2 monolingual children to Switzerland. On my blog in Psychology Today, I talk about these 2 kids who arrived in a small Swiss village, 2 Americans, and they became what they are now. So don't despair.
Donc si vos enfants parlent aujourd'hui entre 3 et 5 langues, ce n'a pas toujours été le cas, surtout après un long séjour passé aux États-Unis où ils sont devenus complètement monolingues en anglais tout en perdant leur français. Mais c'est important ce que vous dites, que les parents se rassurent car il est possible de récupérer sa langue par une immersion totale en retournant au pays par exemple. Pour vous, en l'occurrence, c'était la Suisse francophone. Et ces histoires, finalement, ces histoires personnelles ont façonné vos recherches et les livres que vous avez écrits. Vous confirmez, n'est-ce pas?
Would you say that your personal story with bilingualism helped you get into the research and write those books?
I think it did. I'm not. I've sort of gone through all kinds of stages. Starting off monolingual, becoming bilingual. Changing dominance, 10 years of English education makes you basically English speaking, and then back to France, to the States, etc. So I know all about changing dominance. I know about becoming bilingual successively. I know about raising bilingual children, making mistakes, doing it right afterwards. And I'm witnessing my own little grandson being a simultaneous bilingual from birth. So I think all of that was great help, but then what's crucial, one has to have a personal experience, but one needs to also read up a lot. It's not because you are bi or multilingual that you know about bilingualism or multilingualism, okay? You really do need to read up on the subject, see what the research has done, and the mixture of the two, of personal experience and scholarship, I think helps one really get to the bottom of things.
Avec une dizaine de livres sur la psycholinguistique et le bilinguisme, vous clarifiez avec brio les processus psychologiques et les idées fausses relatives au bilinguisme. Vous faites disparaître les fausses hypothèses que nous avons avec le bilinguisme et vous nous expliquez comment émerge le bilinguisme et comment il évolue sur les plans linguistiques et psychologiques. Quelles sont les raisons qui vous ont poussé à écrire ces livres?
I've done in fact, I did my master's thesis on bilingualism, so you can sort of deduce how many years I've been thinking about this. But when I was getting on in years, I told myself, we really need some books that are for the general public. A book that anybody can pick up and read and learn about bilingualism. So I went back to Harvard. My first book was Harvard University Press. And I said, would you be ready to help me write a general public book that answers simple questions like, who is bilingual? What is bilingualism? Is it okay not to know language fluently, both languages fluently? What's the difference between bilingualism and biculturalism? Do bilinguals have split personalities? The kinds of questions we've all asked ourselves. And they said, go ahead, do it.
Quelle position défendez-vous dans vos livres?
Well, just simple things that everybody knows, because they all say, of course, it's self-evident. Bilingualism is widespread. Okay, half the world's population is bilingual. You can become bilingual at any point in your life, in early childhood, adolescence, adulthood. We're not born translators. I'm a terrible translator. Bilingualism and biculturalism are not the same thing, and they're not coextensive. You can be bilingual without being bicultural. Bilingualism doesn't create any delay in children. It doesn't have negative effects on language learning, on general learning. There are many approaches to leading to successive bilingualism. The kinds of things that need to be said, and that very pointy research maybe sort of doesn't have time to say. Well, I tried to say it in these books.
Même lorsque la nécessité de posséder plusieurs langues s'impose, le bilinguisme reste méconnu et victime d'idées reçues. On croit à tort que les bilingues ont une maîtrise équivalente de leur langue et sont des traducteurs nés, et que pour être bilingue, les langues doivent être acquises dans la première enfance, ou encore que toute personne bilingue est aussi biculturelle, ou que le bilinguisme précoce chez l'enfant retarde l'acquisition du langage. Mais expliquez-nous un peu tout ça et dites-nous aussi qui est vraiment bilingue.
But who is a bilingual? Can you tell us?
Honor to Americans, two North Americans, researchers back a long time ago for some here, okay, in the 50s, 1950s, came up with a very reasonable definition of bilingualism, which I've adopted, which is simply the regular use of two or more languages. Their name are Ural Weinreich and William McKay. Very sensible definitions, because if you regular use means knowledge. Of course it means knowledge. You can't use a language if you don't know the language. So knowledge is there, but knowledge isn't the prime criterion for defining a bilingual. Now, in the layperson's viewpoint, it's speaking fluently both languages without an accent, having learned both languages as a child, etc., all kinds of factors. But I think simply the person who uses two or more languages in everyday life is a bilingual or tri- or quadrilingual person. I think it's a much more reasonable definition, and that's the one I've been adopted and that I've been using ever since.
Cette définition du bilinguisme, qui présuppose qu'un bilingue est une personne qui utilise deux langues régulièrement dans la vie de tous les jours, elle paraît si simple, mais pourtant elle permet d'expliquer un phénomène qui est souvent interprété de façon erronée. D'ailleurs, de nombreuses personnes imposent un point de vue monolingue sur le bilinguisme. Et comment expliquez-vous cela, professeur?
When I wrote my first book for Harvard back in 1982, at the end of the book, I told myself, you haven't really said what you think about this question of what it means to be bilingual. You've done a lot of things in that book. Okay, do buy it, it's great. But there's something more. Maybe I needed to write the book to get to that extra point, which is basically the viewpoint that I developed 30 years ago, which is a holistic viewpoint of bilingualism, where the bilingual is a human communicator, a speaker-hearer in his or her own right, who manages life with two or more languages. And what I basically did in those papers in 1985, the bilingual is a specific hearer-speaker, and then a few years later, the bilingual is not two monolinguals in one person. So I developed the idea that as soon as you're bilingual, or tri, or quadri, or quinquelingual, you are a different communicator. You communicate just as well, but you just do it differently, okay? And to get away from this yardstick of the monolingual. And in fact, I've never understood, and that's why I did those papers, why the monolingual, apart from scientific understanding, why the monolingual was the yardstick. In fact, there are two yardsticks. You know, life is complex. There's the monolingual, and then there's the bilingual. And what's nice is that this holistic viewpoint of bilingualism has progressed, and many people here who work in the field of bilingualism have adopted it, and I'm thrilled. But basically, back then, the monolingual was the yardstick, and those who were considered bilingual were these, what I now call exceptional bilinguals, translators, interpreters, bilingual authors. I mean, I give them a lot of space in both my books, but they are exceptional bilinguals. And I'm interested in the run-of-the-mill bilingual, okay? And there's another approach to that run-of-the-mill bilingual, and that's what I wanted to do and explain in these books.
Pour mieux comprendre la réalité de tant de personnes qui se servent régulièrement de plusieurs langues. En France, par exemple, c'est environ 13 millions de locuteurs, soit un habitant sur 5 qui est concerné. Et je trouve que c'est une très bonne chose que vous, professeur Grosjean, vous intéressiez aux bilingues lambda, ceux qui pratiquent deux langues ou plus au quotidien, en famille ou au travail, pour finalement montrer que le bilinguisme est bien plus fréquent qu'on ne le croit et que la vision d'un monde où le monolinguisme est la norme n'est pas nécessairement la plus juste. Plus sérieusement, vous avez proposé de nouveaux concepts pour caractériser les bilingues, en particulier le principe de complémentarité. Pourriez-vous nous le présenter?
There are 2 or 3 basic characteristics or concepts that are crucial in understanding bilingualism. And I'm not going to sort of be over-scientific, but one of them is what I've now called the complementarity principle, which is basically, it's very simple, that we as bilinguals use our languages in different situations, with different people, in different contexts, to do different things. Now, of course, sometimes the same domain is covered by both languages, okay? But there are other domains of life which are covered by just one language, okay? And in my various books, you'll see a grid where you have languages covering one domain, languages covering both, 2 domains, 3 domains, etc. But basically, we use our languages for different things, okay? And as soon as we understand that, we can understand things like fluency. If you're not fluent in both your languages to the same extent, it's probably because you don't need to be fluent in both your languages to the same extent. If you don't know how to translate from one language to another, it's probably because you're translating from a domain which is covered by one language, and you don't have the translation equivalents. The example I always give is when I was in the States, I used to teach statistics. In fact, I've written a book on statistics. It's one of my several books. And that was my English domain. I came to Europe, I came to Switzerland, was asked to teach a course, and I struggled for a year. I just did not know the vocabulary, and I would constantly ask people, I know the notions, I know the concepts, but I didn't know the words. And if one understands that principle, one can understand fluency, one can understand dominance, language dominance. Maybe you just use some of your languages in less domains, in less situations, then therefore you're dominant in the other language, translation, etc. It explains many different things. And it also explains why children do not develop to equal vocabularies in each language, okay? You just have to look at a bit of that geography of how the languages are spread across their lives, and you'll understand perfectly why one language is maybe not fully covered in the sense it doesn't have a full vocabulary, whereas the other does. Of course, if you add both 2 or the 3 or the 4 vocabularies, you get far beyond what a monolingual child has.
Le principe de complémentarité nous permet de comprendre comment et pourquoi nous utilisons les langues que nous parlons à différents degrés de maîtrise de vocabulaire, par exemple, en fonction des contextes et des domaines dans lesquels nous évoluons le plus souvent, et que notre bilinguisme, au final, est la somme de tous ces domaines, plutôt que 2 langues parfaitement maîtrisées. Un autre concept que vous évoquez est celui du principe de mode langagier. Pouvez-vous nous en parler un petit peu, s'il vous plaît?
Okay, so I've just given you one brick that's crucial. Okay, please walk away with the idea that with this idea of the complementary principle. And the second brick is language mode, and that's crucial too. Basically, as a bilingual, as a trilingual, we're constantly asking ourselves, without asking ourselves, what language should I be speaking now? Okay, currently it's English. And the second question we're asking ourselves is, do I bring in the other language or not? Okay? The first question is language choice, and it's a fascinating topic. I loved writing about language choice because it's hyper complex, but we do it so well. We just do it so well. We know that in this situation, with that person, for that context, etc., it's going to be that language. It really breaks down. It does sometimes, okay? And the other one is, do I bring in the other language? If I don't bring in the other language, I call that being in a monolingual mode. And all of us here go about our lives often being in a monolingual mode, okay? And if we don't have an accent in the language, if we're pretty fluent in the language, you know, we might surprise people. They say, oh, I didn't know you also spoke Russian or French or whatever, okay? At the other end of the continuum, we're with bilinguals who share our own languages, with whom we feel comfortable enough to use the 2 or 3 or 4 languages together in the form of code switching and borrowing, okay? But it's a continuum. And what we're doing is we're navigating constantly, okay, every minute of the day, as it were, along that continuum, changing base language, changing the main language we're speaking, and deciding whether we should bring in the other language or not. And so the language mode has really explained, has helped us understand many things, okay? Ofinga Garcia very kindly is here, and I'd like to say hello officially to her. And she's done a lot of work on the bilingual, what I would call the bilingual language mode. That is, being in a situation where you can use the full extent of your languages to communicate, to do things, to interact, to write, to read, etc. Okay, I would call that being in a bilingual mode. Okay, but of course, children, adults also need to learn to be in a monolingual mode, because we do spend quite a bit of time speaking, writing, etc. monolingually. So I think the notion of language mode is another one of these really crucial notions when we understand, in trying to understand bilingualism.
Le choix de langue en fonction des gens que nous rencontrons ou des situations dans lesquelles nous nous trouvons nous fait passer la plupart de notre temps en mode monolingue, mais il nous est possible également de passer en mode bilingue, parfois de façon prolongée, en empruntant des mots et des expressions aux divers registres, en les utilisant dans un continuum entre deux langues, une pratique translangagière tout à fait normale qu'Ophélia Garcia nous avait expliqué lors d'un précédent épisode. Maintenant, j'ai une autre question à vous poser. Mes filles font leur scolarité dans des filières bilingues de la ville de New York. Elles sont sur le point de devenir complètement bilingues et biculturelles. Et est-ce que je dois m'inquiéter ? Pourriez-vous nous parler un peu de ça, du biculturalisme?
No, don't be worried. It's wonderful. Two things maybe. The first is that bilingualism and biculturalism are not the same thing. Okay, especially in Europe, there are many people who are trilingual, but who are not bicultural or tricultural. Think of all those wonderful Dutch speakers who speak beautiful English. You go to Amsterdam, they speak English to you. They're not bicultural. I mean, they've learned the language, but they've never lived in the other culture. You know, it's not to bring them down. It's just that they haven't needed to be brought up in the other culture. So bilingualism and bicultural are not the same thing. Okay. Of course, they can cohabit, and they do in many people. And what does it mean to be bicultural? It means to interact with two or more cultures. It means to be in contact, to interact, and also to merge certain aspects of the two cultures. And that's a very interesting thing in being bicultural. I don't know about you people who are bi or multicultural, but there are certain things that are sort of merged in one's behavior. And I sometimes have difficulties with those things. Space is one of them. When I come to America, I suddenly realize, hey, you're much too close to the person next to you, because I'm using my French space or Swiss space, okay? And I look at people looking at me saying, wow, so I back off, okay? Being in a cafe in France, my English side comes through, and I don't dare say, garçon, deux bières, s'il vous plaît, you know. I said, s'il vous plaît. Of course, he doesn't pay attention to me. You know, pardon. You know, being bicultural is very interesting. Many of us do it well. Okay, we know how to behave as an American, more or less, in an American home, etc. French, but there are certain aspects which are blends, and that makes it fascinating. But I do want to say something about biculturalism, because it's something that we don't learn enough about. There are whole chapters here in these books on that, and that's the notion of identity. I don't know how many of you have been through the identity, I won't say crisis, but powerful, moment where you ask yourself, am I American, am I French, am I American, am I Mexican, etc. And one's got to sort of work that out, okay? Work it out, basing ourselves on the perception of others, okay? Others won't sort of say, you French people, and you say, but I'm also American, basing ourselves on their perception, on all kinds of things, on our needs, etc. And then deciding to, if possible, accept who you are, and that is a combination of several cultures. Too often, especially when you're an adolescent, you choose one or the other. You're forced into one or forced into the other. and you say, no, I'm not, I don't want to have to do anything with my Mexican roots, I'm American, etc. And that's too bad. And if there's one thing we can do as parents and educators and scientists, etc., is help our young people, in the sort of teens, to sort of understand, first of all, what it means to be bicultural, and secondly, to come to the point where they say, it's okay to be both. It's okay to be a member of three cultures. I can be dominant in one culture, dominant in the other. It's okay. I'm a bit this, a bit that. And that's why now I say, as I said at the beginning, I'm proud to say I'm a mosaic of several cultures. And that's my identity, okay? I don't have to just choose one identity. I can choose several identities.
La relation entre bilinguisme et biculturalisme n'est pas toujours évidente. On peut être bilingue sans être biculturel et vice-versa. La personne biculturelle est une personne qui participe à la vie de deux cultures majeures. Sa propre attitude est un mélange des deux cultures auxquelles elle appartient. La différence entre le bilingue et le biculturel est que le bilingue peut désactiver une langue presque totalement, tandis que le biculturel n'est pas capable de se défaire d'une culture en se trouvant dans son deuxième milieu culturel. Parlons maintenant du rôle des familles et de l'école dans la construction du bilinguisme chez les enfants. Est-ce que, par exemple, les parents peuvent planifier le bilinguisme de leurs enfants?
Okay. If parents could, it would be wonderful. But at the same time, I know what it's like to be a parent and now a grandparent, and we're busy doing all kinds of other things, okay? But if one can work out a plan, at least at the beginning, and try and work it out, so that'd be very nice. I think there are a number of questions we should ask ourselves. First of all, when should the languages be acquired, okay? And that's not a difficult question. It doesn't have to be from birth, okay? I mean, I only learned English when I was 8. I got first prize in English literature in my school. I mean, it can be done at various points in life. When is the best time for the family to make sure that the child becomes bilingual and keep up his bilingualism? Because that's the problem. If you start too early, sometimes you don't have the resources to keep up the child's bilingualism. So one is, when should the languages be acquired? The second question is, what strategy will you use? Will you use a one person, one language strategy, which isn't the only one, okay? The one I prefer is one language in the home, one language outside the home. But there are various other strategies. Books are full of these approaches. The third question is, how can I make sure that the child will need both languages? The magical word, okay, well, it's a third now, complementarity principle, language word, need, okay? Children are wonderfully pragmatic beings, okay? If they feel they don't need a language, because Mama and Papa understand English perfectly well, okay? Why should I push and speak French, okay? So we have to create the need. And when we brought back our kids from Switzerland, for 3 years, we kept up their French by creating a need. You know what we did? First of all, we invited all their friends from Switzerland over to America for a month. They were thrilled, okay? Parents paid for the trip, okay? And then we had a monolingual kid in the house. Fantastic, our kid, there's need, okay? We'd go find newcomers, new French families, and say, see if the kids would play together, okay? And if they did, we had 2-3 months of French speaking before English came in, There are all kinds of ways of creating a need. If you do create a need, and not the need, speak French because I told you to speak French, that's not a need, okay? But a real communicative need, then I think you'll be doing well. Another question is, what other support can you count on? It can't just be one parent, okay? It's got to be, if possible, other people, other adults, other children, maybe the community, the schools, and that's why I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to tell Fabrice how wonderful I think his initiatives have been, because you're creating a need for French in this case in New York, of all places. Fantastic, okay? Find support in the community, in educators, etc. And if possible, think about all of that before you start on your road to bilingualism, and don't think, if possible, but you all know this, that you know what the answers are. Think about it, read up, and that's why I wrote these books. Read about bilingualism and try if possible, to not make mistakes, because if you do, and you little by little you realize that your child doesn't want to speak to you in Hungarian or Russian or whatever, you'll feel terrible. You'll say, what have I done wrong? You'll be upset, and the child won't be upset and all that. There are nice, natural ways of doing it where everything can happen quite nicely, freely, serenely, and that's why one's got to think about this. By the way, we'll end with how can we read you more, and I really advise you, because it's simple, it's free, you don't have to buy a book. I have a blog on Psychology Today called Life as a Bilingual, and where I write short pieces, and there are many, many on bringing up children as bilinguals. Okay, so just go on the blog and read up on that, on those. And one of the posts is basically the questions parents should ask themselves when raising bilingual children. And of course, there are many other books around.
Le pragmatisme des enfants fait qu'ils vont s'intéresser à l'autre langue s'ils en ont vraiment besoin. Pour les adultes, le défi est donc de créer ou recréer ce besoin sans stress pour les enfants, pour ne pas les démotiver, en s'informant, en lisant et en développant des situations pour pratiquer la langue cible. Il est possible aussi de s'appuyer sur les écoles, en créant des filières bilingues, comme je l'explique dans mon propre livre « La révolution bilingue », qui s'inspire du rôle des parents dans l'élaboration de filières bilingues dans les écoles publiques de New York, et que François Grosjean discute d'ailleurs dans son dernier livre. Pour conclure, on entend de plus en plus souvent parler des avantages et des désavantages du bilinguisme. Professeur Grosjean, pourriez-vous en présenter quelques-uns et aider nos auditeurs à faire le tri dans tout ce qui circule sur le sujet?
There are many advantages. There are sometimes disadvantages. One's got to be realistic. Now, of course, you know that researchers have been looking at very cognitive type aspects, and I think it's a sort of young literature, let's say it this way, okay? I was going to say a messy literature, it's not that messy, but it's a young literature, okay? And there are counterexamples, so one's got to be careful. But it really does seem as if cognitively, on various aspects, bilingual children seem to do things more easily, okay? Just a number of these things. But when I was writing my books, I actually went to bilinguals to ask them what the advantages and the disadvantages were of being bilingual. And maybe it might interest you to know what your fellow bilinguals told you. Of course, the first one is you're able to communicate with different people. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You have access to literature and movies and whatever in several languages. What it seemed, they told me, these were adults, that it helps you learn other languages, which is true, okay? It fosters, with biculturalism, of course, open-mindedness and different perspectives on life. What I love is when we can sit down and say, yeah, I understand why you're saying this, I understand where you're coming from, but of course I understand that this person is coming from another world and says this thing, etc. It gives us this perspective on differences, which is so crucial. And of course, it gives us many more job opportunities, or our children, our grandchildren, etc. Now, when I asked bilinguals what the disadvantages were, rest reassured, only a third mentioned any disadvantages. 2/3 said there weren't any, so that's good, okay? But when they did mention a few disadvantages, they said, well, communicating in your weaker language can be tiring, especially, they didn't mention the complementarity principle, but it was there, especially when it's in a domain or a situation where you're not used to using that language, right? They also mentioned the fact that sometimes it's difficult to translate. Same reason, complementarity principle. How many of us have been asked to help somebody translate a text, and we suffer like crazy because we just don't know the field, that's a particular area, we don't know the vocabulary, etc. So they've said that. They also say when they're tired or stressed or drunk or whatever, they speak the wrong language, or they don't get their words out, or whatever. And of course, if you push them a bit, they'll say adjusting to cultures, because many, especially around here, bilinguals are also bicultural, and it's adjusting to the cultures and being accepted for who they are, okay? That is, members of 2 or more cultures, speaking 2 or more languages.
François Grosjean est une des grandes références du bilinguisme dans le monde. Les billets de blog qu'il tenait pour Psychology Today ont été lus par plus de 2 millions de lecteurs et nous ont permis de mieux cerner les effets largement positifs du bilinguisme sur le développement cognitif. Il nous invite à considérer toute personne bilingue comme un être de communication à part entière. Comme lui, je reste persuadé que le bilinguisme nous ouvre l'esprit sur un monde de culture et apporte de nombreux atouts cognitifs pour les enfants et les adultes.
Thank you very much.
Merci à Emmanuel Saint-Martin de French Morning et à Zara Punawala pour le montage. À bientôt sur Révolution Bilingue.